This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, who is an empowerment mentor. She helps the highly sensitive, the introverted, the intuitive, and/or spiritual woman in breaking free from the good girl facade and blaze her own soul-filled trail. Schedule your discovery call today. Go to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about this conversation. My guest today is April Snow. She is a psychotherapist in downtown San Francisco who specializes in helping highly sensitive clients reduce overwhelm and have more fulfilling relationships. She is also the creator of the Highly Sensitive Therapist Facebook community and the site sensitivetherapist.com. April is on a mission to raise awareness about this innate trait that exists in 20% of the population. Also important to her is helping highly sensitive therapists embrace their sensitive strengths, stop comparing themselves to their non-HSP colleagues, and build more sustainable and fulfilling practices to suit their temperament so they can do their best work. I love this, April. I am so excited that you're on. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm really excited to be on with you today.
Would you share just a little bit about what the highly sensitive person, some of the traits are? I know I've had some other episodes about it, but I would love if you would share a little more with our listeners today.
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned in the summary, being highly sensitive is an innate trait. It's a temperament variation. And what that means is in 15 to 20% of the population, our brains are wired a little bit differently. So we notice more subtleties, we're more emotionally responsive. And the trait can be summed up in 4 core characteristics. So that would be depth of processing. So we're really thinking deeply, we're pausing and reflecting before we act. A tendency to be easily overstimulated or overwhelmed because we're taking in so much information. And our brains have more blood flow in the parts of the brain that are more perceptive, like our insula. We have more active mirror neurons. So we're more emotionally responsive, and we're also tend to be more empathetic. Mm-hmm. And then the last characteristic would be that we're more sensitive to sensory information or subtleties in our environment. So we pick up little details. We're the first to notice when something has changed or someone maybe is a little bit upset or there's a slight shift in the room. So we're really taking in everything that we notice really deeply through all of our senses and through our emotions. That's why we tend to be pretty exhausted and overwhelmed at the end of the day if we're not getting enough time for ourselves. So it can be a pretty intense experience when you don't know about the trait, but once you do and you can take care of yourself, there's actually a lot of room to thrive because we tend to respond really well when things are going positively.
Excellent. And as you were describing all of those traits, there was a dump truck that was going by my home as well. And so I was just like, I know we can all hear that. So got distracted.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We notice things that other people either can tune out or don't notice at all. So it's not that our senses are more finely tuned. We're just picking up on more subtleties.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's hard to turn those things off.
Yes.
Yep.
So I would love if you would share just a little bit about really what got you interested in really not just raising this awareness for, I want to say kind of your clients and more in the general population, but really working with and raising that awareness for the highly sensitive therapist or the professionals that are out there. What got you interested in doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, it all started when I discovered that I was highly sensitive. This was actually right as I was in graduate school learning to be a therapist. So I was I'm really grateful that I was made aware of the trait before I started doing my work, because then I was able to take that knowledge into how I built my practice. And I've only been a therapist for a few years, but already I've seen colleagues burn out and leave the field. I've seen a lot of therapists in our community online really struggling with compassion fatigue and burnout. So it's really important for me that these therapists have a lot of gifts that they're able to take care of themselves and do their best work.
Well, and I love that you were able to have that insight, that discovery during grad school, because for
Mm-hmm.
those who've not gone through grad school before or even plan on doing it, it is a lot when you go into the
It's a lot.
counseling field.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's a lot of information, just yes. So you were able to really take care of yourself during that time, which is
Yeah,
awesome. And I love how you were also part of your mission is really just to raise the awareness in general about
in
this
general.
trait. Yes.
Exactly. Because I see a lot of people that are highly sensitive because they don't know. Either
Hmm.
they're thinking that there's something wrong with them, whether they're probably misdiagnosed with some type of mental health issue, or they're really struggling, they're really exhausted, they're having a lot of health issues. But with just a few tweaks in your lifestyle, it makes a huge difference for us, especially because we do respond more so than a non HSP to positive interventions and
Hmm.
positive support. So we really thrive under optimal conditions more so than a non HSP would. So there's a lot of room for growth and expansion, which is beautiful. Same with therapists.
Yes, absolutely. And would you mind sharing some of those ways that, as a therapist or as a professional with these traits, or people in general, like what are some of those things to be able to really to take back that power in a sense, to be able
Mm-hmm.
to thrive again and not
Yep.
feel quite so overwhelmed? What are some of those things they could do?
Number one is definitely getting enough downtime and quiet in your day. So that is
Yes.
the key essential piece. So not just, okay, first of all, getting enough sleep. And
Hmm.
that includes having enough time to wind down before sleep, because our brains are so deeply processing everything throughout the day. A lot of times that hour before bed is the only time we get quiet. So our
Hmm.
minds are going to ramp up a little bit. So you want to incorporate that into your sleep routine. Just time to lay in bed and just process the day and let your mind do its work. Kind of
Hmm.
like downloading, just like a computer would download information.
Mm.
So winding into your sleep, giving yourself enough time for sleep, possibly even more than 8 hours. A lot of HSPs need 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep, and then enough time to get up in the morning. Because once you start to rush, that gets the nervous system amped up, and we are really prone to get overstimulated very easily. And that can be because we're feeling anxious. It can be because we're excited. Any type of state where
Hmm.
we're feeling a little bit stimulated can really dysregulate us. So sleep, downtime, and then breaks throughout the day are really key. So if you're a therapist, taking at least a few minutes after every session to decompress, to close your eyes, to have a little bit of quiet, to turn off that stimulation. And for anybody, on the hour,
Hmm.
every 2 to 3 hours, take a little walk, get a cup of tea, and just close your eyes for a few minutes, go to the restroom if you need to, if there's not a space to do that. That's going to make a big difference. You want to stay ahead of the exhaustion, essentially, and give
Yeah.
your brain a rest. And then another piece for me, which I'm really passionate about, is creating a life that works for you, right? So
Mm.
in whatever way that looks like, because we live in a world it's really busy, it's really loud, there's a lot of pressure to do and to show up, and that can not be so supportive for us. So for
Hmm.
me, that's been really getting my boundaries dialed in, really being adamant about carving out time for myself at least one day a week where I don't have any obligations.
And I was just going to say, clarify like the boundaries. And that's what you were just saying. Is
Yes.
this
Yeah.
like, yeah, nope, there's no obligations. I pick a day that
Right.
it's more just kind of,
Hmm.
it's going to flow however, or yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Having that unstructured time,
Yeah.
that we really thrive in that when we can just be with ourselves in our
Yes.
process.
I love it. I
Yeah.
know you also incorporate quite a bit of, I want to call them mindfulness practices. I know
Mhm.
I've been on some call with you before and you've
Mhm.
done some meditation. Is that
Mhm.
typically what do you incorporate that not only in your own life, but also like into your practice as a business person as well with your clients?
I do actually. So I use a lot of self-compassion work, which we've done in our gatherings,
Hmm.
and then also mindfulness meditation, visualization even. So, clearing away energy, clearing away physical stress, just imagining that leaving the body, self-compassion work, because because we notice a lot of details and tend to be perfectionists because of that, because we can see how well things could have gone,
Hmm.
and we can think 10 steps ahead. we tend to be hard on ourselves. And when things aren't going so well, we feel it more. So just bringing in that self-compassion where to say, we're doing everything the best that we can. It makes sense that we're feeling this way. And that can be really impactful for clients. And I also use it for myself. And then definitely taking mindfulness breaks, breathing, getting in touch with my physical experience, and then doing some energy clearing as well.
Oh, I love that, because that's part of that, as you were saying, wherever that person is in their life, if they're at the job or in between sessions, whatever that may be, all of those techniques that you're talking about, you can do wherever you are.
That's it. No one can see you're doing them.
Yes.
The beauty.
So whether it's the breathing or getting, back into your body or paying attention to your surroundings or the visualization, that's all, you can do that internally. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can do it in the middle of a meeting, on the train, when you're walking, at your desk, anywhere that you are.
Yes.
You can incorporate those practices, and they make a big difference. I've noticed even when I just stop and take 3 deep breaths, that just resets my whole system. And I do that a lot with clients. If I notice that they're getting a little dysregulated or they're feeling a bit of a flood of emotions coming through, I'm like, okay, let's just pause. Let's take some deep breaths, reset, and it makes a big difference. It's amazing.
Well, and I love that too, that I think sometimes we live, like you said earlier, in such a fast-paced world that sometimes we get into that rut that we just kind of, we're just kind of rushing.
Yes.
And that when you're able to see that in the person that's, in the same room with you, you can also help let's slow this down a little bit. Let's get you recentered again. And then that as they begin to raise that awareness, they can do that going forward for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It becomes automatic. And I've noticed that myself, that I will just automatically just take a deep breath. Or I've started to notice at a more subtle level when I'm starting to get a little dysregulated or a little bit too immersed in what I'm doing and that exhaustion is kicking in. Because we love to immerse ourselves. We love to go deep.
Yes.
Where we can exhaust ourselves. So that's been my current practice, is slowing down before I reach the exhaustion point.
Well, and I love that reminder, and that you're even sharing your own process with our listeners, that it's like, as you gain that awareness of, oh, do I actually have these traits? And this is what's going on. That explains so much about what happens in my life, that it's this process of as you continue to self-reflect, as you pause, you gain that deeper knowledge of yourself, and you're able to, as you're saying, kind of redirect it versus I keep going down to that exhaustion. That you're able to bring yourself back.
Exactly, right. And I like how you said that, learning your own unique experience of it. And then learning when you need to take a break. Like, okay, I notice when I'm here, if I stop now, I'll have some more fuel to keep going throughout the day versus, burning out quicker.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, when you were going through grad school, did that become more of a topic of a conversation, like with your classmates as well, that as you gain that your own awareness of, oh, I have these traits, did that kind of help, go into your classmates where you guys talked about that, or again, kind of raising the awareness, or was it more of you were recognizing it and kind of like, okay, I'm going to go down my own path to kind of put this out there in the general public?
That's a good question. So I remember we talked about introversion a lot. I was in a cohort model, and there were, I think, 14 of us through most of the program throughout the 3 years. And we talked about the presence of introversion and how that showed up in some of our classmates. And then there was a lot of talk about how we could make space for us, because I'm a highly sensitive introvert. And there were at least one highly sensitive extrovert in our cohort, but we didn't talk about the sensitivity piece as much. I was still learning about it. A classmate in a sister cohort actually introduced me to the topic, but it wasn't brought in the same way as introversion, extroversion, which I think is obviously more commonly known. But I did appreciate the conversation, the awareness of that people were showing up differently and had different needs, and the engagement is going to look different, and the personal needs are going to look different. And I appreciated the acceptance of that.
Well, and I love that too, because it takes me back then to my, when I went through grad school, very similar, like the introversion, extroversion was there, which is a temperament. And at the same time, like what you're saying, wow, what if we incorporated this into graduate programs that, because it is so much about our work in this field is the acceptance, the inclusion of everybody, that their own differences, right? Because that's what truly makes the world go around versus us versus them type of mentality. Right. And I love that. Yeah, you were gaining that awareness from a sister cohort, and how your own cohort was role modeling. It's okay to be where you are, and to, I think, so much of the time for people to have space for one another, that the silence is okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Exactly. Because there's always this, for anyone who's listening that's an introvert, you know that pressure to need to interject into a group, and that pressure can actually shut us down, right? It actually, our brains tend to turn off when we're under pressure. And I've had that experience my whole life. And then once there was that acceptance just to come into the room when I felt called to, I actually showed up more.
Yes.
Same experience.
Yeah. It's almost like when there's acknowledgement, and you're like, oh, yeah, it is okay. Great.
Exactly. I'm okay just as I am.
Yes,
and that's what I want highly sensitive people to know. You're okay just as you are. You don't need to change. Actually, the world needs you.
Yes.
And the trait, it's an evolutionary trait. If you think about years and years ago, being able to notice subtleties and look at the fine details, that's a survival benefit, right? And then there's the other folks that look at the big picture, and we all work together, and we're all needed. So hopefully folks that can just learn to accept themselves and learn that what they bring to the table is actually really valuable. You don't need to change yourself.
And that, as we're talking just about HSPs, it is also, I mean, it's for everybody, right? It's really that total self-acceptance that your uniqueness is okay. It's beautiful, and to really embrace all parts of yourself. I love that.
Absolutely. Because in, the HSP community, we make up 1.4 billion people in the world, 20%. So there's so many subcategories, sub-identities. So even within the HSP community, there's lots of different identities and populations. So yeah, accept all those parts of yourself.
Yeah. And when we do that, I find that the other fascinating piece of that, right? When we can really love ourselves and embrace ourselves for who we are, you actually have more capacity to love others and to hold them where they are. And so sometimes I think we can get that reverse where it's like, oh, I've got to love everybody. And it's just like, well, it's got to start from within so that it can radiate out.
That's it. Exactly. Right. And it frees up a lot of energy. When we are trying to be someone else, or we're trying to shift ourselves, it takes a lot of energy to stay within a box. When if you just settle in and be yourself, you can, that love and that acceptance can just kind of flow out.
Yeah.
There's more freedom for that.
Well, I'm curious, do you have any, I guess, either tips or tools for highly sensitive, whether they're therapists or professionals out there that are listening, to help them, besides the tips that you gave regarding taking the downtime, the sleep and all of that, any other things that they could do to kind of go about their day, or maybe sometimes even, I want to say maybe exploring kind of what their day looks like and how they could possibly modify it so that they don't go to that overwhelmed place?
Oh, that's a good question. So the first thing that popped into mind was the need to reduce decision-making, and also the need to create more predictability, more routine, because we spend a lot of mental energy with every little decision, more so than other people. So I think of myself, like even when you send an email, we probably spend 3 times as much time on that email than someone else would, or even picking out an outfit or deciding what's for lunch. So every decision takes a lot of energy for us. So any way that you can streamline your day and create more routine and structure is going to be really helpful, especially because we tend to struggle with transitions because our brains are wired to process and reflect before we act. So that has, for me, that's been really helpful. So I have my week is set up so I have time scheduled for everything, and time carved out for all the things that I need to do, and that's taken a lot of overwhelm away, a lot of pressure away because I know, okay, I have time for that. So when I'm doing a task, I'm completely immersed in it. So it frees me from any anxiety or worry. And then I also am freed up because I know what's happening when I just any way that you can create predictability is really important, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I like that too, because I was even thinking like sometimes those morning routines, right? Where instead
Exactly.
of rushing, it's like, oh,
Yes.
I'm going to get up and as I wake
Mhm.
up, I can do some of
Mhm.
my mindfulness or I can drink my tea in a very
Yeah,
mindful way. I can review my day if I need
exactly.
to journal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing, creating space for self-reflection. Because we are
Hmm.
feeling everything so deeply, it's very important to process all of that, whether that's with a friend, whether that's journaling. I feel like I process a lot even through mindful movements, through
Hmm.
yoga, through dance, walking in nature. Any way that works for you is really essential.
Well, and I love that. I'm hearing more and more that I think for a lot of people that I've worked with in the past, when they hear meditation or mindfulness,
Mhm.
it's very much about I can only sit, I can only do this, and I
Oh, right.
really remind folks of like, no, there's mindful movement as well. And so I love that
Absolutely.
you
Mhm.
said that again about yoga or just movement in general, just being present in that it looks differently, but it's also a way to get some of the stuff kind of out of the body that's been holding it and being
Exactly.
able to release that. I
Mhm.
love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just about creating a different lifestyle for ourselves, right? One
Yeah.
that's really supportive and that meets our needs. So, one thing I work a lot with my clients on is being able to move towards acceptance of creating the life that you want,
Hmm.
without so much judgment or comparison. Because I think we tend to want to create lives that look like other people's lives.
Yes.
And just instead looking within and say, what do I need? What would really support and benefit me? And
Yeah.
let that be okay if it looks a little different.
Well, and I love that. Again, it's due to the self reflection, and really sometimes it's turning off sometimes all the electronic stuff where you can have that quiet space because we do get bombarded with here's the latest and the greatest, or so and so
Yes.
is doing this. And
Right.
we can feel that pull. And I know for women in general, there seems to be quite a bit of that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. A
And
lot of
so,
pressure.
yes. And so just being able to say, it's okay that I can
Yeah,
turn that
it's
off. And
okay.
if my
Mhm.
life looks vastly different than so and
Mhm.
so's over here, that's also okay.
That's okay too, right.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned turning off the screen time because that is key for us, especially. And I know you're going to speak a little bit, or perhaps you already have, about Dr. Elaine Aron's work. And something that she recommends is, 2 hours every single day of quiet time, right? Of removing the stimulation. It doesn't have to be meditation, it could be
Hmm.
cleaning your house or going for a walk or sitting in contemplation or just laying down and just enjoying looking out the window. It could be anything, but just 2 hours just to decompress and um, just let your system settle a little. And I know that's hard. 2 hours is a lot of time in the middle of our
Hmm.
day, um, but just trying to work towards that. That just gives you an idea of how much time we actually do need when you think of 2 hours every day. And we're probably a lot of times not getting any because we're on our phones, we're on
Uh-huh.
screens.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that it is trying to frame it as like 2 hours. It's a big chunk of time. And at
It
the
is.
same time, it's about your well-being.
Right.
And
Exactly.
when we're not in our own bodies, when we're not really centered, we
Hmm.
can't truly be in our business. We can't be in a
Right.
relationship. We
Hmm.
can't be where we're with somebody else.
Right.
We're doing something else because we're so off center. So it's like, yeah, it's a necessity. It's really
A
building up to
necessity.
that. Yeah.
That's it. Yes, building up to it. And it is a necessity for us. Taking time for quiet is essential for
Yeah.
HSP. It's not optional. It's
Yeah.
essential. And the more that we can do it, the more we'll be connected to ourselves and the more we'll be able to recognize when we're not in our flow and in our ideal state. We'll
Hmm.
be able to tune into that quicker and make adjustments along the way.
Well, and you just brought up a great point, right? So
Mhm.
in our businesses or in our
Mhm.
personal lives,
Mhm.
that when we're not doing the self-care piece of it, the well-being piece of it, you aren't going to be as creative. You're not going to
Yeah.
be able
Mhm.
to process as much as you want or be able to take that action because you're overwhelmed, you're burnt out.
That's
And
it.
these are all the ways to prevent that. That is like, okay,
Exactly.
it is okay that I am an HSP. It is okay that I take a little longer for these certain things, and that me taking care of myself is not selfish.
That's right. It's not selfish. It's essential.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, it's essential, because I think, again, women often get the message of if they say no to something, or they do take that their bubble bath, or they go take a walk in nature. It's like, well, you're being selfish because we've got all these other obligations going on. And sometimes you honestly just need to modify what that schedule looks like.
That's it. Something I do in my group work is, we practice saying no, like literally just practice saying no. And another thing is saying, what can you let go of, right? What's not working? What can you let go of? Because you'd be surprised what you don't have to do.
Yes.
Or what you can delegate or let go of. But we do put that pressure on ourselves to be perfect, to do everything, wear all the hats, especially as women, because historically that's what we've done.
Right.
But if we can clear away some space, I know it's counterintuitive, but we'll actually be more productive, especially for the HSP brain, because our brains work so intricately, and if we can just have space let that creative process happen, we come up with profound ideas.
Yes.
We get really excited about.
Yes.
There's so much possibility there. So if we can just take some time, we'll be more successful in our businesses and in our personal lives.
Well, and I love how you said too, it is counterintuitive.
It is.
There seems to be this myth that we've got to hustle all the time in order to make it. And that's it's like, no, you really actually have to slow down.
You do. You really do. You're robbing yourself if you don't slow down, actually, because there's no space for that creation to happen.
Oh, well, I have loved this conversation, April, and I so admire and I'm inspired by your mission to really continue to raise awareness for all people, both your clients and for other therapists, but for our population in general, about the highly sensitive person and the traits, and that the more we know, then the better we are equipped to be able to take care of ourselves and to be the all that we need to be or want to be in life without feeling that overwhelm and depletion. So I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate you continuing this conversation and spreading awareness, because it is important for the folks out there that don't know they're highly sensitive to discover it, or the folks that are highly sensitive just to be encouraged and supported.
Yes, absolutely. Well, would you mind sharing what is some ways that our listeners could actually find you, get more information about you? Sure. What are some good resources?
Absolutely. So for the therapists out there, you can find me at sensitivetherapist.com. On the site, you'll find a link to the Facebook community that we've talked about, information about an upcoming retreat, or if you're listening to this later, there'll be another retreat next year, and lots of resources, working with a highly sensitive client, resources for building a sustainable practice, and lots of other information. If you're not a therapist, you can find me at expansiveheart.com. There I have lots of resources for the HSP in general, including a guide to reducing overwhelm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And folks, her information is it's truly a wealth of information, and it's very, very helpful. So encourage you to go check her out for sure.
Thank you, Nicole.
Well, again, I hope everybody enjoyed this and found this helpful. And thank you so much, April.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Do you want to receive episodes directly to your inbox or stay informed on my latest offerings? Then I invite you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/podcast, and there is a button for you to sign up for my newsletter. Thank you again.